Royal Marines fast roping out of a Merlin helicopter as part of exercise Merlin Storm. Because on any deployment, Commando Helicopter Force needs to be able to protect itself. This exercise may focus on disaster assistance in preparation for Op Caribbean, but all elements of CHF are put through their paces for any eventuality.
You can't land and refuel helicopters in isolated high-threat areas without being able to protect yourself. So as the Marines, we are commandos first, and we deliver the protection to the battlefield helicopters. And it's a unique capability that we work very hard to uphold.
Which is why identifying and defeating the enemy on exercises like this in South Wales and across the southwest takes place.
It is difficult, and that's why an exercise like this is so important, so that the ground elements can work in tandem with the air elements and work out how that communication link happens in real time.
This is one of those air elements. Wildcat helicopters manoeuvring underslung loads. This exercise includes personnel who have just returned from Op Caribbean and those who may be deployed there for humanitarian relief in hurricane season. Experience and knowledge can be exchanged.
To have an exercise like this together, we do periodically, and the focus obviously on humanitarian aid, disaster relief or HADA operations. It's because we're attributed to potentially deploy to the Caribbean if we need to. We're practicing underslung load lifting for aid, practicing fueling, serials, reconnaissance. It's getting everyone together and practicing it in one place that's probably the key part where you get skill fade. The actual evolutions for the aircrew, so lifting loads, moving troops, etc., is something they practice from day one and continue for every year they're in the job.
So what's it like flying a Wildcat on deployment?
So the Caribbean in particular is quite a challenging environment to fly in. It's clearly very hot, which makes the helicopter performance relatively poor compared to more or colder climates. So the hotter it is, the poorer the engine performance, and that's typical across any helicopter. So when you're working in particularly hot climates or even high climates, so when you might be up at altitude at 4,000 or 5,000 feet, it degrades the engine performance so that you're approaching your power limitations. Now the helicopter is well configured to operate when it's hot and high. However, you just have to be a bit more careful, a bit more gentle on the controls to ensure that you don't exceed any tolerances.
Royal Naval Air Station Yeovilton in Somerset is where Commando Helicopter Force is based. From here, they deploy around the world, either on Royal Navy ships or with the RAF. Exercise at Merlin Storm is run by CHF but brings in other supporting elements from Joint Helicopter Command, which is why this is not just a Navy exercise.
Everyone has their part to play.
So my job as a mobile air ops team leader would be to go out forward of any helicopters arriving, recce landing sites or potential sites to be dropping kit and equipment or landing helicopters to provide relief. So in the event of a hurricane out in the Caribbean, and I'll be one of the mobile air ops team leaders who are attached to Commando Helicopter Force for any hurricane relief operation that we may or may not do later on this year.
If there is a natural disaster, local infrastructure could be destroyed, which means moving troops into hard-to-reach places could be the difference between life and death. Which is why even transportation of Marines like 40 Commando is practiced during the exercise, making sure everybody is ready for the worst-case scenario. Whether you're a Chinook, Wildcat or Merlin pilot in charge of logistics or any other part of the team working on Op Caribbean, it's all about being prepared.
In my career, I have been involved in humanitarian aid operations in the past, but they're all different. They all have their own unique nuances, and the Caribbean will be no different, I'm sure. I will be taking the mobility troop out there to provide the force protection and the tactical refuelling operations that are required.
On deployment, these could be vital supplies that help save lives. Getting it right takes precision timing, great communication and teamwork.
Okay, so in normal operations there's 2 air crewmen in the back of the aircraft, the number 1 and the number 2 air crewman. The number 1 air crewman is predominantly up the front of the aircraft. So the number 1 air crewman will be operating the TSU, which operates stuff like your performance, and you can, when you have troops on board, you put them in, so that updates the weight of the aircraft, so you can have accurate performance when you move in.
So the pilots are there and you're kind of like the extra eyes.
Yeah, the extra eyes, exactly. So I'll be here with a map in between the 2 seats. So extra eyes looking out of the front and then aiding with the navigation as we're going through. And then if we're going to a landing area, which might be a bit tight, for example, the number 1 air crewman will open the door and then he'll stand in the position here, looking out, making sure, checking that the tips of the blades and the tail's clear, and then giving the pilots an accurate voice marshal into going down, judging the height and the distance of where they need to go. The number 2 air crewman down the back of the aircraft, predominantly, his main roles is going to be checking the tail, making sure that the tail's clear when you're landing.
Yeah.
In just a normal transit, the number 2 air crewman, they'll be monitoring fuel and low-level radios.
And that's what those windows are for at the back?
Yeah, the bubble windows at the back. So the bubble windows at the back for the number 2 air crewman is just so he can put his head right out of the window. And he can check and have a good view on the left and the right, depending which side the number 1 air crewman's on. And then the other job that the main number 2 air crewman is the load hatch.
Right. So that's down here?
Yeah, that's down there. So this is the load bay. So to get in here, the number 1 air crewman, traditionally he'll get you in the general vicinity of the load, and then the number 2 air crewman will be in this position here. Will sight the load underneath the aircraft and do the fine tuning to get the aircraft over the top. And then once the aircraft is in position over the top of the load, we'll bring the aircraft down, we'll hook the load on. I'll check that the load is all true, plumbed properly and connected well, and then the number 1 air crewman will raise the aircraft up whilst I'm in this position, just making sure that everything's good with the load, and then once we lift out of there and transition away, whilst we're transitioning, I'll be here making sure that the load is safe. I'll just be in this area here checking that the load's flying well, and checking that it's within limits as well.
But when you're doing that in a kind of potential hurricane scenario with extreme weather, what's it like?
Obviously, if you're doing any of the job that we do in any sort of inclement weather conditions, there are always considerations. We've got various weather minimas and stuff that we have to abide by, visibility and cloud bases and stuff. But yeah, we train to be able to operate in all different weather conditions, and that's why we do the training that we do, to make sure that we can do it correctly and safely.
This exercise involves personnel who've just come back and those who are waiting to be deployed to the Caribbean to help with humanitarian assistance if required during hurricane season. Air and ground elements have to work in unison so troops can react fast during disaster relief. Refuelling is being practiced, so if needed, helicopters can carry out multiple missions.
It's basically used as a pit stop in different helicopter landing sites, so aircrafts can go and do a task, and they can come back, have a quick refuel in a selected area where we will be set up. We can fuel them, up they go, and off again. And with that, we've come with 2 big air portable fuel containers, which hold up to 1,900 litres of aviation fuel. I'm on Op Caribbean at the moment, so I'm on my standby time, so just basically R2 ready to go whenever needed.
They practice these manoeuvres time and time again, refuelling, picking up equipment, but none of it can be done without the right planning and logistics team behind it.
My role really is anything logistics support, so that can involve movements of personnel, ammunition, weapons. So initially there would be a recce by some of the troops here, so we have MEOT, also JHSS. They can go out onto the ground, get a picture. They would be feeding that back to the ops room, command, wherever we might be. We might be on a ship, just off the coast, or we could already be on land. And then based on that information, we would look to call forward our equipment and supplies.
Exercise Merlin Storm is run by Commando Helicopter Force, but it showcases how all the armed forces can and do work together in crisis situations. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel.